It is noon, so welcome everyone to our May Leaders Learning Live, supporting the mental health of campus leaders and professionals. I am Marissa McCasty. I'm the Leadership Development Manager for the SUNY SAIL Institute. If you haven't joined us ever before, the SAIL Institute does leadership development programming for faculty, staff, and students across the SUNY system. And just a few housekeeping items. This webinar will be recorded, and any sort of questions that you have, please place them in the chat. This is meant to be an interactive discussion, so the more questions and comments you have in the chat, the better. And so we decided to do this, to provide you this topic around mental health way long ago. We thought, May is Mental Health Month, great. This is awesome. And then COVID-19 happened, and we were like, oh, okay, we really need this. Okay. So we are, many of us are juggling professional lives and personal lives, and that's really tough. So we hope that this discussion here today with these experts will be a resource to you and will help you through these times. So I have the pleasure of introducing our speakers, our moderator and speakers. Our moderator today will be Marcia Burrell. She is one of our SAIL Leadership Fellows, and she's a professor of education at SUNY Oswego. And then we also have Joyce DeWitt Parker, who is the clinical director, associate director, and licensed psychologist at the University at Albany. We have Thomas Tyson, who is the college associate dean for mental health services at Suffolk County Community College. And we have Karla Vermeulen, who is the deputy director for the Institute for Disaster Mental Health at SUNY New Paltz. She's also the associate professor of psychology there. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Marcia, but I would like to, Marcia, if you don't mind, do a quick poll just to see, get a feel for the room. We're gonna ask what your current, mental health challenge is. So let's put up this poll here. Okay. So we're asking what is most disturbing your mental health right now. This could be, it could be all of these things that are disturbing your mental health, but what is the most prominent thing in your life right now that you're grappling with? If there is an other that resonates with you more and you feel comfortable with putting it in the chat, please do so.
So we'll give everyone a chance to fill out the poll, and I'll give it probably 20 more seconds. But we have a distinguished panel, and you can see who they are. I'm hearing some feedback from someone. I'm not sure. Joyce, if you can figure out who that might be, that would be great. And I am a professor, so I'm not a mental health professional, but probably about 7 years ago at SUNY Oswego, worked with K-12 teachers to help them think about how to use mindfulness in the classroom. And I used a little bit of it in my class, and whenever I do it, I'm always afraid. And so without some risk, there can't be some reward. So I'm gonna start with a very small breathing exercise, and you should almost be done with your poll. You can see the results. This is great. I'm gonna do a very small breathing.
Mindful breathing. Close your eyes and rest your hands on your knees. Bring your attention to the touch of your body on your seat. Feel the weight of your body on your chair or cushion. Make sure that your back is straight and that you're comfortable. Take a few deep breaths into your stomach and chest.
So mindful breathing over, you survived that. And usually my students tell me, wow, that was great, Dr. Burrell. I'm glad you took the time to do that. And sometimes we forget about taking time to do that. We're going to proceed with the questions that are part of our presentation, supporting the mental health of campus professionals. And some questions are for all of our panelists and some of them are for some of the panelists. And I encourage you to continue to ask questions in the chat space. So this first one is for all panelists. When it comes to maintaining good mental health, what are some challenges due to the nature of your work? And what challenges are you and your colleagues facing currently? Let's start with Tom.
Okay, thanks very much. I appreciate it. So, you know, the first thing I thought of is everything that I've gone through and my colleagues who I meet with, you know, every week, Zoom meetings. And the primary thing is really the entire, you know, it's the COVID situation and the entire reworking of what we do, right? Going from in-person to have to, for us at Suffolk, within a period of 2 weeks, to transition to remote learning and, you know, I'm in student services, support services structure. So it was all of that. It was incredibly challenging. And then, you know, all the other things that, you know, I've been living with and everybody I know has every day, which is the social, you know, distancing, not desired at all, but from one's colleagues, where we can meet online, but we don't often. So that and many other things, I think, lack of boundaries and difficulty in just structuring life in this new environment. Mm-hmm. So I think for the faculty out there, it's got to be many of those same things.
Thanks, Tom. Karla, why don't you go next?
Yeah,
Karla?
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, I second everything that Tom said and everything that everyone has been endorsing in the polls. I do think, you know, so much of this it's the uncertainty and the protracted nature of this. I mean, my background is as a disaster mental health professional, and I'm always making this comparison with the normal, you know, traditional disasters. There's a before, a during, and an after. And right now we're kind of all living all of those phases at once. And that's incredibly stressful. And we're constantly having to adapt. And pretty much each of those adaptations are negative. It's like the next new difficult thing or the next new challenge. And so it's just kind of acute stressor. So all of our like chronic stress levels, I think, are just getting bumped up higher and higher. And that is not what we evolved to be able to deal with. So I think it's the all of the above, the uncertainty, especially about when there will be an end point to this. You know, we started off saying we have to go into this viewing it not as a sprint, but as a marathon. And now we don't even know if it's a traditional marathon or an ultra marathon. You know, when are we going to start to feel sort of stable again? And until we feel stable, it's just really hard to kind of keep up with those stressors. So that was a very broad answer, but all of it, I think.
Very good, Karla. Joyce.
Well, I think, you know, first of all, there were all the pre-COVID pressures that we all deal with in higher ed. Doing more with less and trying to continue to be creative and innovative and provide support and services to students. And as Tom said, you know, then to shift very quickly within about a week or two to, in our case, it was telemental health and telehealth services, which was a new ballgame for us. And so students were learning this new platform for remote learning, remote education, as we were learning to provide services at the same time. So it's like this shared experience which was highly unusual. And I think too, to think about the fact that we're now tethered to our computers in a very different way than we were pre-COVID. And there's been a bit of talk about Zoom fatigue, for example, or video conferencing fatigue, and making sure that you have balance and you create some breaks in the day. To sit at a computer for 6 or 8 hours a day is just unreasonable. But because we're overachievers and high achievers in higher ed, we try very hard to do that. And because we can work remotely, there's this expectation that we should be even more productive than we were in the office, because we can work 24/7 if we want to. But is that the goal? No, it's not the goal. So finding balance, and we're now trying to do this in a space where we're homeschooling children and balancing other responsibilities, caring for others, and it's a lot to manage.
Thanks, Joyce. I think about your responses to this question, and when you say we're all in this together, the students were into this, and you worried about whether or not they were going to get what they needed, but then you did worry about how you would produce in the same way. And I did find myself feeling like I was working 12 hours a day and still feeling like I wasn't getting everything done. So, I'll move on to the second question, and this is for you, Joyce, so you get to keep talking with us. Okay. Why is it important for us to focus on mental health for our faculty and staff?
We provide so much for others. And as I alluded to, we're caring for kids and other family members and whatnot. And it's hard for us to take care of ourselves, because oftentimes we perceive that as being selfish, but it's not. Good self-care is far from being selfish. And when I think about it, we are a valuable resource in higher education, because we are oftentimes very connected to students. We know that our students are entering, college and university with a very complex set of needs at this point. Over 40% of students say that they have anxiety entering college. So they have a complex set of needs, and yet we're trying to support them, but we need to have that balance ourselves as well. And so we can't support them unless we are caring for our own mental health. If you think about getting on an airplane, when the flight attendant goes through the instructions before a plane takes off, they say, if you're traveling with a child, you take the oxygen mask first, and then you give it to the child, right? And that's because if you're not in good shape, you can't care for others. And the same, I think, is true for us in higher education.
Thanks, Joyce. It's funny, 30 years ago, there wouldn't have been necessarily a session on mental health for faculty and staff. And now there's so much provided for students and faculty. Tom, tell us a little bit about how we can lessen the stigma around mental health in academia. I still think there is a stigma. So talk to us a little bit, Tom, about how to lessen that stigma.
Well, I think it's a great question. And I think the answer to it is being honest and being connected with others. They're one of the things that, I shared with my staff. I was going to be doing this webinar, and one of my mental health coordinators shared with me a letter from a faculty member. And for me, it really strikes home, because I think it underscores the need to connect with everyone else. And I want to read it in a second, but I also want to say that while I was preparing for this, and really since we've been locked down with this, with the COVID virus for the last couple months, I was thinking of a book I read that I loved called Tribe by Sebastian Junger. I don't know how many people have read it, but I highly recommend it. And there was one vignette in there where he was talking about London during the bombing by Germany in World War II. And there was a great concern on the part of the government about the mental health breakdowns that were going to occur for the population. Surprisingly, what they found is that the level of mental health distress went down. It became lower, paradoxically. And one of the things they pointed to is that although it was a horrible situation, people were together in bomb shelters, underground, but they were connected. And it was that social connection which really helped people to feel a part of one another and lessen their anxiety and created a much more cohesiveness and a sense of belonging. In any event, I'd like to read, this is a letter that a faculty member at Suffolk sent to her students, and I love it for its openness and its truth and its invitation to connect. All right, I'll read the letter now. Hi, everyone. We talked about this a little bit in yesterday's synchronous session with my formerly face-to-face class, but the same extends to all of you. I want to make sure everyone is holding up okay. I know that this has been a lot, all of it, going remote, staying home, watching and hearing people being sick and dying, worrying about how long this is going to go on, stress about next semester, stress about graduation, stress about transfer. I know many of you are still working in essential jobs or have taken on additional hours or new jobs, and that creates its own set of stresses and concerns. And of course, anyone who has friends and family who are sick and is dealing with a whole host of other additional stresses. I'm trying to be transparent as possible that we're also feeling the stress in our house. It feels like we've been doing this forever. I'm worried about my kid being separated from other kids. I'm worried about my family in California when they'll get to see them again. I've had a cousin in California test positive. My job is 10 times harder, and trying to do it while running a makeshift preschool is, well, someday my kid might learn to read, but it's not going to be through my work. None of you signed up for this. I didn't sign up for this. And I loved it because she shared this with her students and provided a common ground and a way to connect as people. Although, yeah, she's the professor. And I thought it was beautiful. And I think that is so much of what we need to do more than ever, even though we're physically separated, is to find ways to connect, whether it's Zoom, whether it's texting, whether it's a phone call, any way we can to get connected with one another. And I think that's one of the most important ways to cope with everything that's going on.
Yeah, Tom, thanks for reading that letter and sort of bringing it closer to home, at least for faculty. And, you know, I found that students wanted to come to Zoom, but Joyce mentioned that students were over-Zoomed in some ways, and that created its own problems. But the fact is, when we're honest with our students about what we're going through, then they're freer to learn. They're open to learning. And sometimes being vulnerable is one of the most difficult things that faculty and staff can do. And I think that that letter really illustrated that well. Karla, we're going to move on to the next question. Keeping in mind current events, describe the long-term mental effects faculty and staff might experience, and what are the coping strategies for those long-term health effects?
That is such a difficult question. I mean, it's certainly something I think everyone is grappling with right now, because we just don't know. I mean, the word unprecedented has probably never been used as, there's an unprecedented use of the word unprecedented these days. And it's hard to figure out. I mean, I'm seeing this both in terms of staff and student needs, but then also with some of the professional responder groups and healthcare groups that the Institute for Disaster Mental Health tries to support as well. I think part of what we need to do is not wait, not sort of take that, okay, we're just gonna, get through this as best, well, we are trying to get through it as best we can, but addressing mental health issues now and not letting them build up to the point where they become insurmountable. I mean, I think even things like, what are we gonna see in terms of rates of agoraphobia once people are allowed to go out again? How many people have internalized the message that going out into the world is unsafe? I think that's going to be a really big concern. Substance use, that people are, self-medicating or just trying to get through the day. So I don't have a real good answer on this, but I think sort of trying to head off as much as possible some of those longer term reactions by practicing the self-care that we've all been talking about, by trying to break it down. One of the things, this isn't necessarily so much about longer term reactions, but just in terms of current stress and anxiety, one thing that we keep recommending is break it down. I think we all have this kind of amorphous cloud of stress and fear and anxiety kind of floating around, and it gets really hard to see past that. So one of the things that we're recommending is start writing lists. Figure out, what are you actually concerned about? Is it the illness? Is it concern for your kid's education? Is it your job? All of this stuff. And some of those, I think it's really important to recognize, some of those genuinely are things we can have some level of control over. We can control our own behaviors to meet some of those issues. Some of those things are not controllable, and that's incredibly stressful. Like, we are generally not good at dealing things outside of our control. So those are things where you're going to need to use the more emotion-focused strategies. So, what can you control using more problem-focused strategy to actually minimize some of that stress, shrink that cloud, and then figure out ways to actually handle the emotions. And part of that, I think, is just recognizing we need to tolerate some unpleasantness right now. We're not going to feel great for a while, and we don't like that. We're sort of used to having more control in that way as well. So getting that kind of tolerance, or trying to build our comfort with just, okay, we will get through this. So not getting overwhelmed in that regard. So not a great answer, because I don't think there is one, but, just again, trying to kind of manage what you can to prevent it from turning into a stress reaction or, clinical level anxiety or stress down the road.
Yeah, and Tom and Joyce, I'm wondering if you also had a response to that. And Karla, I think your response was exactly on the money. I think that a simple thing like making a list to pour it out of your head so that you can take a moment to just stop and breathe, that's a perfect solution. It's a perfect remedy for being a little less overwhelmed. I didn't know if Tom or Joyce had a response about the long-term health effects, and if you also had some strategies.
Oh, I have just one thought, and I was looking at the chat. Liquor stores continue to be open. They were considered to be essential, and I understand that on some level, because if there's someone who is, has an alcohol issue, a serious alcohol issue, to be totally honest, it's more harmful and detrimental for them to go cold turkey and not drink at all. So that can lead to other problems. So, but they were open. And so people have been using some unhealthy strategies for coping, like, using alcohol or smoking more, or, even in my household, there are 4 of us here, 2 college students and two other adults, and myself and my husband. But we each stepped on the scale about a month ago. And we've been doing some emotional eating, a little more chocolate than usual. And we each noticed, even though our clothes fit, we've gained about between 2 and 4 pounds. But that's not a healthy coping strategy. It's nice because we've been together to have meals together. But looking at just coping strategies, we don't know at this point what the long-term effects are of some of the way we have to operate business, but we do know, I mentioned Zoom fatigue, that our brains process information differently when we're looking at a screen. And especially if we're in gallery view, for example, there's a lot to look at. And so then, there's some coping strategies even with Zoom, in terms of just having speaker view available, or turning off your video altogether if you can, or better yet, if you can have a one-on-one meeting with someone by phone, that's better, because your brain isn't overloaded. So I think our brains are just trying to reset and reboot and kind of understand everything that's happening. And we need to, operate and use some self-compassion in terms of just managing that.
Thanks, Joyce. Tom, did you have anything else on this?
Yeah, I did. I wanted to say, I think, and looking at it really from my own situation, the importance of boundaries. And this gets into what Karla was saying before about control as well. I think it's critical being able to set up your own space when you have your own time to do what you need to do. That's one of the hardest things for me. I have a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old. And even before this started, right, I said to everybody, 11:45, so don't bother me as we get close. And of course, that's when my kids both wanted to eat and the dog needed to go out. Great. Okay. But I did it. But the point being, and then I said to everybody, I'm going in for this now. I put a sign on the door that basically was a euphemism for keep out, in the hours. But I've learned the hard way that I've had to create boundaries for myself to kind of keep my professional focus intact. Because it's very easy, as we all know, being home, to be distracted by so many different things. So that to me is the most important thing. And I guess connected with what Joyce was saying too, that there's different types of ways that we can care for ourselves. And whatever it is for you, whether it's going out on the deck with a cup of coffee, whether it's taking a walk, whether it's going for a drive in the car, my favorite, late in the day, I tend to go for a drive in the car and I bring my wonderful dog with me and the two of us just travel down to the bay and watch the water. But whatever it is, scheduling it in, I found that I had to schedule it in, and often the late afternoon was good for me. All right, this is my lunch now at 4 o'clock. And I'm going to take that break because, as we all know, it's easy not to do that. And then to find yourself, I was finding myself often, I'm trying not to as much, but returning emails at 11 o'clock at night. I didn't have to, but it was hard for me to stop, I guess. So, I've tried to be aware, and I guess where we started today with mindfulness, try to be mindful and aware of what was going on inside of me. And that, by the way, I think has been one of the gifts for me. I hate to put it that way, but I guess in this dark cloud, a silver lining, is the time it's given me to reflect, self-reflect, and be aware of what's really important to me. I think more so than I was when I was rushing around doing the myriad things I was doing in my life. And that has been a bit of a gift. And so to appreciate that, I guess the opportunity to kind of really rethink what's most important to you and then make a place for it in your life and something every day for yourself.
Yeah, Tom and Joyce and Karla, you all are sort of connecting to this idea of reframing. And sometimes the reframing is making a list and getting it out of your head. And sometimes it's just stopping and taking a break. But I want to respond to Darlene Schmidt's question about grief. She says, how about the grief and loss issues we're all facing with one another, with seniors and a college student. So do any of you want to talk about grief and loss of many of the things we would have if we were on campuses? Do you want to respond to that first, Joyce?
Sure. I mean, it's real. And Darlene, it's good that you're on the call. She's a colleague of mine, another clinical director, and this is real. And again, it's one of those shared experiences. Some of us are dealing with more loss and grief than others, but losing loved ones, or earlier before the call, someone was talking about a graduation drive-by, so it's a graduation celebration, and people go by and they honk their horns and celebrate. So that loss and grief is real, and I think we have to acknowledge it and talk about it. We talk about it here in my house because I'm with some people too, 2 college students who missed some really key opportunities and celebrations at the end of the year. And so we had to find ways to help them to celebrate. But I guess giving people space and time to to talk about it, because I think so often we try to focus on being happy, or, you know, there's a lot of research out there about grit and being resilient, which is fine and good. But no matter how you slice it, this is tough. And we just need to slow down and have the space and the compassion to deal with that, rather than saying, okay, let's pick ourselves up by our bootstraps and, you know, be mentally tough about this and move on. No, allow the tears, allow the quiet times. That's important.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with all of Joyce's points on this. It's just so essential. And I think sometimes there's this kind of comparison, like, well, you know, I'm sorry you missed your graduation, but, you know, at least you haven't lost a grandparent. You know, we had this like ranking of losses, but for the student who spent their entire career looking forward to that senior toast and walking in the commencement ceremony, especially from a developmental perspective, they don't have the life perspective that older people might have to recognize, okay, you know, yes, this is sad, but this isn't the end of the world, because it feels like the end of the world to them right now. So I think we really do need to validate that and give them the permission to mourn what they have lost. You know, hopefully we can find some of these alternative ceremonies like the drive-bys or the postponed commencement. But yeah, I mean, just as Joyce was saying, they deserve recognition that these are significant losses for them.
Yes.
Great point, Karla. And Tom, anything else, or should I move on?
Well, I just wanted to make one quick point that something that Joyce said really triggered this with me, and that is to have compassion, of course, for others, because we're all going through all of these challenges, but also to have compassion for yourself and to allow that. And I think being in education, and for myself, student services, anybody in that area, and also in counseling and mental health, you know, we're built to understand other people and support them and to give and then give some more because we want to. But as we all know, you get to a point where you can't give anymore, and we've all reached it. And to have compassion for yourself and say, well, I don't have to do more right now. I've done the best I can do. And now I've got to take that break, whatever that is, and, you know, engage in some form of self-care, and how important that is.
Thank you, Tom. We're going to take exactly 20 seconds to breathe and stop, and I'll watch the clock. That was 20 seconds. As we serve our students, there's a focus on offering support for student mental health. And you've made the case for why the mental health of our faculty and staff is important as well. What resources are available for faculty and staff? Let's start with Karla.
For faculty and staff, boy, I'm probably not the best person to start with on this. I mean, I will say I found that my administration at SUNY New Paltz, and I'm not being sycophantic here, I swear, but they have been amazing in terms of both trying to provide as much technical support, you know, administrative support, practical support for faculty and staff as possible, while also recognizing how difficult this is. So, I mean, they've been doing a lot of validating and expressing their appreciation, which I think really goes a long way. Just, you know, just having it recognized that this is hard for everyone. So that's more kind of emotional support that we're receiving, but I think that's been really important for my colleagues and I to recognize that, or to perceive that from our administration.
Thanks, Karla. You know, on our campus, we have something called the Employee Assistance Program, and it's a volunteer program, but I'm not sure if that's something that's across all campuses, but I know that at SUNY Oswego, that's something we have. Joyce, what resources are available to faculty and staff?
We do have an employee assistance program, and they are providing virtual services as well. like on our campus at UAlbany, her name is Brenda Seckerson, and she has provided a wealth of resources on the webpage. I've shared a few of them with Marissa that I think she's going to put in the resource list. But before I go further, I just wanted to thank you for allowing us twice now to take a break. And someone noted earlier, this person, Lizette, said, can we have 20 more seconds? Why? That's wonderful. But because mindfulness is about, not judging, yourself or others, being aware and staying in the present. And it's so easy, I think, right now for us to, the loss and grief is about what could have been, wasn't, didn't happen. And a lot of anxiety is about the future. When are we going to open back? What does the future bring? All that uncertainty. But thank you for just allowing us to stay present in the moment and to just breathe through it. So sorry about that.
No, thank you. Thank you. Tom, anything you want to talk about in terms of resources on your campus or in general?
Well, I think in general, everybody may not all campuses have an EAP program, but certainly we are fortunate to have good health insurance, right? And there's plenty of practitioners out there. And, one of the amazing things, I'm a psychologist also, and I have a private practice. And one of the amazing things that I and my colleagues have found is how quickly and willingly our clients have engaged and really enjoyed the remote therapy process. So it's out there and it's working tremendously. It's very different. And I was just reading an article where in the Washington Post where they're referring to the what seems to be increased intimacy that is being provided through, you may be in a therapy session with your client who's laying on their bed, it's a different scenario than we're used to, than being on our couch in the office. So there's plenty of wonderful people out there. Find people the best way you can, which is if you're open about it, ask friends, relatives, people you trust and like, if there's anyone they know, because that's always the best referral, I think. But if not, there's plenty of places to get referrals. You can look on Psychology Today, online, many other sites, and find people, and obviously call and get referrals through your the mental health provider and your health plan, and that insurance will direct you to people within a certain radius. But it's go out there and contact some people, try them out, make a few calls and or Zoom sessions or whatever, FaceTime, and talk to them and get a feeling. When you find somebody you like, give it a shot. You don't have to do this alone. You don't have to struggle through it. And as I think Joyce said earlier, just summing up all your grit and resilience. Admit that you're having a tough time and find somebody to connect with. And if you've done it before, you know that it can work and it's wonderful. And if you haven't, give it a try. It's a great way to unload and gain perspective and get support during a really, really hard time. So that's there for all of us.
Yeah, Tom, and thank you, Joyce, for putting that emotional hotline in the chat. Sometimes the hardest step is picking up the phone and making the call. We all make plans to, get a counselor or to finally get into counseling, but how many days do you wait before you actually walk over and pick up the phone? You'll find that there is someone there who's able to direct you and put you in the right spot so that you can get somebody that's really helpful. But it's really difficult to pick up the phone. So thanks for that hotline. And, again, Tom, thanks for reminding us that we do need to do that, good insurance or not. It's pretty frightening to go to that next step. So Joy, I've got a question for you. I will say that some faculty and staff listening might be dealing with certain feelings in their specific roles, such as the imposter syndrome or feelings of having to compete for resources of time and just the overall feelings of needing to stay relevant. What advice do you have for those that are listening to assist them in alleviating or mediating these types of thoughts?
Oh, when I saw this question, I thought, imposter syndrome. I mean, there's so many of us who've dealt with this in a variety of different ways. It's not just women. It's, the body of research came about because of women and their needs, but men feel imposter syndrome. You do at the beginning of your career, at the end of your career, in the middle of your career, when you have advancement. So it's real, first of all. And, even when I think about the imposter syndrome, that's about feeling like a fraud, feeling like a phony, and that, eventually you're so afraid and anxious because you think somebody's going to find out that you really don't deserve whatever it is you have or where you are. And I think sometimes the imposter syndrome can impact us in terms of us seeking mental health services because we think, well, those services are for people who really need it. And I really don't need it. Well, why not? But we always think someone else should get the services. So about imposter syndrome, this is kind of born out of, in some ways, perfection. We work in an environment that demands high achievement and perfection from us, and we're always being evaluated. And that sets the stage for us feeling like imposters. So I think one of the most important points for me was to find a good support system. Find other people who I was close to, and actually talk about it and ask other people, did they feel that way too? And lo and behold, I found that every single one of even my mentors felt that way. And, I've been in my career for over 20 years. I still have mentors, and I have different sorts of mentors for different reasons, both on my campus as well as other campuses. And that's been really, really helpful to just be vulnerable and to say, has this been your experience? The other thing is to look at the data. So you can feel like an imposter, but does the data show that you're actually achieving? Because those people who have imposter syndrome feel that it's never enough. They're never really quite good enough. And sometimes we work ourselves into the ground because we're so worried about measuring up. Basically, I think writing new tapes, because one of the things I would tell myself when I was in grad school was, if I don't succeed, I'm going to be flipping burgers in McDonald's, right? That was useful only up to a point. And yes, I'm very driven, and most people who have imposter syndrome are very driven, and we second guess ourselves. So having a good support system is good. Having a journal and writing about it, I think, can be really helpful too. I was looking at my own journal just recently and just realized how far I'd come in a year. So reframing the situation and really having support and communicating, opening up, being vulnerable with people.
Thanks, Joyce. Tom and Karla, this next question is for you, and we all have pieces of the imposter syndrome, and it's when we have doubts. No one would ask us to do something if they doubted we could do it, and we have to trust people. And I think that if you can become vulnerable and you trust that if somebody asks you to do something that you can do it, you can sort of overcome those feelings, but we all have those feelings. So Tom and Karla, as leaders, we care about our teams. How might we uncover whether a faculty or staff member on our team is experiencing emotional distress? How can we help them? Tom?
You're muted, Tom.
Sorry about that. I think that it's really critical, and it's a great question, because the thing that we need most, we don't have in our current structure, which is connectedness. And that gets back to something I said before: stay connected with your faculty and staff. Have meetings. I have meetings now not necessarily because I have some amazing, overwhelming work-related stuff to talk about. I have some things, but I schedule them so people have a chance to connect, including me. I love the meetings. I think people are much more alert, focused, and attentive in my meetings now than they used to be before the virus took hold. So, but I think it's because we all have this common need to connect. So when you connect with people, you will find out how they're doing. I've, in meetings had staff members become emotional about various things and share some of the challenges that they're going through right now that are really upsetting. And that's wonderful. They didn't necessarily need more from us other than for us to hear them. So I think that's the first thing, right? When you're helping somebody is hear them and understand them. And whether it's in a group setting or whether you're making an individual call to somebody because you noticed a look on their face during the meeting and you wondered if everything's okay. And that's really the most important thing, is to be open, to listen. You don't have to solve it necessarily. And then if it's relevant to share, and you feel it'll be helpful to share yourself some of the struggles that you're going through. Joyce just referred to that. She was talking about the imposter syndrome, and I thought it was so relevant because this is common. We're all feeling it at times. I believe we all are. I know I have. And she said also look at the data. And it was really like she was reading my notes about that, because I said, it's irrational, and it really is, right? It's we have these irrational thoughts, but they make us get down and feel badly about ourselves. And the last thing I wrote down was share with others and connect with others, and that brings it back to the point I'm trying to make. Stay connected with the people that report to you or that are part of your department, and be in touch and be mindful. Just pay attention, and you'll notice when they're having trouble. And then again, as I said before, you'll find the right way to connect with them. And if it's more than they're just unloading, then you'll have some resources from today and otherwise in your life that you can help to connect them with professional help if that's what they need.
Thanks, Tom.
But listening is where it starts. Sorry.
Karla, do you have some recommendations on how to help people experiencing emotional distress?
I think a lot of what I would say we've already said throughout this discussion. I agree, providing that opening for people to talk and to, say they are struggling, say they need some support, normalizing that, destigmatizing it very actively, framing that as a strength. You're not weak if you say you need help or you need some additional resources. You're being strong to acknowledge that, because then that's what's going to allow you, meaning the staff member or faculty member, to continue taking care of everyone who's depending on them. I think that, making it okay to acknowledge this certainly is important. I also think we want to sometimes recognize that someone might just be so in the midst of, survival mode pretty much, that they can't go to that place where they are opening up those emotions, because they won't be able to close that can if they do allow it to open up. That's not great. They're at some point going to have to deal with it, but sometimes people just really have to kind of stay focused on the mission so that they can get through to the next side. And so sometimes I think we risk overly encouraging someone to open up when they just are not in a place where they can do that, or you're not the appropriate person for them to do that with, or something like that. So I'm not saying, ignore it or deny it, but respect that sometimes people, maybe that's a healthy form of boundary keeping for that person at that time as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And, as you're professionals in this field, and Tom said, listen, and you listen to different people and they need different things. Someone in the chat said, my responsibilities are changing as of about 3 weeks ago, and I feel a bit unclear right now. This is incredibly stressful. I feel a big loss of control. I'm not sure. Does someone have a response to that?
Well, my first quick response would be make it clear, ask for clarity. So ask the people that you report to, tell them that you're feeling like you're not totally sure of what's expected of you and what the priorities are. Can you please make that clearer for me, and the time frames involved? So that would be one place to start that might lead to a feeling of greater control over your situation.
And, you know, too, Carrie mentioned sometimes you just need to go and take a break and go for a walk. And that might be the solution or the resolution to some concern that you might have. But I think reaching out to health professionals and then the health professionals listening to what's being said and scripting something that'll help them move to that next level. I mean, it's very difficult. You know, this has been a fantastic afternoon with experts, and your passion comes through loud and clear. And I'm sure that our participants have learned something new from this forum. I hope that people will consider the app Stop, Breathe, and Think, but I wanted to give our panelists a chance to give us some final words for supporting the mental health of campus professionals. And I'm going to start with Joyce, go to Karla, and then Tom, and then I will watch the chat to see if there are any additional questions. So what are your final thoughts? What do you want to tell this audience of brave people, 62 people who came to listen to what you have to say?
Ooh. Well, I just wanted to say I have a friend who started a gratitude journal, and so every day he writes down 3 things that he's grateful for. And he started that during COVID, had some health challenges of his own. He's high risk, and he has shared that with folks on Facebook, and it's been an enjoyable journey for us all to be on. Sometimes it's very basic, other times it's funny, and sometimes it's painful, but to be grateful and to think about what we can be grateful for. And as Tom said earlier, you know, there are some silver linings, I think, in this whole, in this pandemic. We're forced to really think about what our priorities are. You know, love caring for other folks, being, you know, thinking about our commitments. And so I think that's a positive thing. So, and the other thing I would want to say is just to try to, and you used this word earlier, to reframe. So yes, we have lots of challenges, but we also have lots of opportunities right now. There are opportunities for training. You know, I've attended more conferences virtually than I could have before, or webinars, because, you know, they're available and usually they're recorded so I can watch them. Usually it's, I get up early, so 7 o'clock in the morning. But think about the opportunities that present themselves right now.
Thanks, Joyce. Karla.
Yeah, very much building on that. I'm a big believer in the concept of post-traumatic growth, the idea that going through something difficult, we suffer as a result of it, but it sometimes can lead us to reestablish priorities and appreciate things we never recognized the value of in the past. So I am hoping we'll see quite a lot of that on the far side of this. I have a newfound appreciation for my colleagues and how hard I saw all of them work to try to adapt to this and try and meet the needs of our students. And so, you know, that's a positive thing. And I don't think, I mean, it is a silver lining. I don't think that is in any way diminishing the difficulties and the challenges and the suffering people are going through. You don't achieve post-traumatic growth unless you have suffered. But it's possible. And I think, you know, reminding people that we will come out of this changed in some positive ways as well as some negative ways, and emphasizing that. I've been doing that with students as well. I mean, having experienced this as they're heading into emerging adulthood, they're going to be unstoppable. If they can survive this, they can get through anything. So, you know, taking that kind of positive, but not Pollyanna-ish, not, you know, diminishing the negative side attitude can be helpful.
Thank you, Karla. Tom.
I think great comments, I think, by both Joyce and Karla. And I would just, you know, add to that I think positivity is extremely important. And so at the end of the day, maybe making a list of things you feel that you accomplished, things you did well, how you may have helped some of your colleagues. Because again, what we're doing is so different in how we're doing it than we were before. So it's important to recognize that under very stressful and difficult circumstances, I was still able to do and to achieve this. So reminding yourself of those things. And I think the other thing is to take action. Joyce said, and so appropriately, it's important to remind yourself what you're grateful for. And again, I guess in a mindfulness kind of way, to be aware of the things you appreciate now so much more than you did before. I don't know how I took drives before, but I didn't appreciate them the way I do now. I take my time, I'm not rushing. I stop to look at the bamboo reeds swaying in the wind. I'm aware of all these things that I might have just bypassed before. So to really pay attention to the gifts that you've gotten in this very challenging time and to appreciate them. And then the last thing I want to say is just take action. Do some of these things and maybe look at what you're doing already and say, well, when do I feel better? Well, I feel better when I do such and such. I'll give a personal example. Yesterday, there's a good friend down in Florida, and we text once in a while, but we hadn't talked in a long time. And I just thought, you know what, I'm going to give him a call. So I got on the phone and we talked, and you know, we did our thing. You know, we talked about very meaningful things. We did some of the guy's sarcastic humor stuff, and it all worked for me. It was wonderful. And I thought to myself, gee, why haven't I taken action on this before? I've got to do it more often, and I will. So thinking about things is important, being aware of emotions, but take action on those things. Make sure you follow through, and that will help you to feel better, I think, more than anything else.
So Tom, Karla, and Joyce, it's been a pleasure to be with you. I wanted to say one last thing. Last night I was listening to All Things Considered, and one of their final stories was about the Optimist Creed. And the name of the story, I'm looking for it right now, I can't find it, but basically it was optimism. Is it a personality trait, or could people possibly learn it? And I tend to be a pessimist, but the Optimist Creed really spoke to me. So I'm going to read it, and then I'll see if there are any additional questions in the chat. Promise yourself to be strong, so strong that nothing can disturb your peace of mind. To talk health, happiness, and prosperity to every person you meet. To make all your friends feel that there is something in them. To look at the sunny side of everything and make your optimism come true. To think only of the best, to work only for the best, and to expect only the best. To be just as enthusiastic about the success of others as you are about your own. To forget the mistakes of the past and press on to the greater achievements of the future. To wear a cheerful countenance at all things and give every living creature you meet a smile. To give so much time to the improvement of yourself that you have no time to criticize others. To be too large for worry, too noble for anger, too strong for fear, and too happy to permit the presence of trouble. And that was on National Public Radio last evening, and it really did help me to see things a little bit differently than I tend to. We've got 2 minutes left. I'm gonna sign off unless, Marissa, what would you like to say to us?
Yes, I just want to say thank you. This has been great. And on the screen, I have some resources here. We have resources from SUNY New Paltz, Disaster and Mental Health. They have put together some resources for you for caring for yourself while caring for others, as well as Joyce had mentioned her EAP coordinator Brenda Seckerson had put together some resources, and those are here as well. There is a website that, state agencies, most if not all state agencies have an EAP coordinator. This is the link to find yours on your campus, and there's a few other ones there for you. And we do have the contact information of all of our speakers today. So if you have a question or want to collaborate in any sort of way, that is there for you. And we do have a couple upcoming webinars. We have our self-care webinar June 5th, June 10th, Leadership in Times of Crisis, What Are We Learning? And then June 18th, we will be back here for our Leaders Learning Live for our Personal and Organization Resilience webinar. So those will be, the links to those are going to be on our website for you to register. And follow us on Twitter and to be able to get any sort of announcements that we do. Thank you all so much. This has been great. I know, like Joyce was saying, we need to fill our own cups before we can fill other people's, and I do think that this has helped with that, so I really appreciate it. And we'll see you all next time at Leaders Learning Live.